Ready to start the meeting? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Housing and Communities Select Committee. I am Councillor Claire Simmons, Chair of the Housing and Communities Select Committee, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. The event is being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. Now, I would like to welcome all those in Committee Room 1 at Kensington Town Hall and everyone watching on YouTube. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would ask members of the committee to please make sure your mobiles are on silent or switched off. And we're starting with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you. So, agenda item 1, membership and chair and vice chair. The committee is asked to note the membership and chair, vice chair, as agreed at full council meeting on 24th of May. Noted?
Noted.
Thank you, everyone. The next item is apologies for absence, and we have apologies from Councillor Issay and also Councillor Gardner for lateness only. So we've got that down. Declarations of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare? No. So we move on then to item 4, which is minutes of previous meetings held on 27th of March 23 and 24th of May 23. Does the committee agree to sign the minutes of the previous meetings as a correct record?
I don't think there's an objection from Councillor Gardner, but she's got a point
Okay.
which the governance team can take away. She's could the communities team bring back their proposed data set for their performance, or share it with the committee, I guess she means offline, so we can agree a format in advance of their compiling them, please. You remember the one we're talking about? No objections to the minutes from here, but one from member of the public.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I bring up some points about the previous meeting? And I'd like to include the decision tracker, which is at the end of all the papers, because I really feel that should be part of the previous.
So the reason that's at the back is because it's part of the work programme. So we'll be dealing with that under that agenda item. So this agenda item is simply to agree or amend any aspect of the minutes. We're looking at agenda item 4 on page 5.
Yeah, I do have a question on page 6 of section 4.2 about the panel of 5 residents was constituted to instruct Binman on the last stage of the consultation.
Yes.
And I just want to confirm that that's gone ahead with Binman and no one else.
I think we would have to probably ask Iago, the officers for that. But that will be, is it an action?
Yeah, I'm not sure we've got anyone here who's quite able to answer that question.
Yeah.
We can certainly
So we can notice this question.
to report back through you.
Thank you. So aside from that, does the committee agree to sign the minutes of the previous meetings as a correct record.
Agreed.
Thank you. And now we move on to agenda item 5, Nottingdale Heat Network. Thank you for this excellent report, I will say. Who would like to start with speaking on this?
Well, first of all,
Councillor
can I start with welcome
Oh,
to
thank you.
Chairman. One other thing, just on the question that was posed by Mr. Smith, I don't believe Binman's had the construction.
You don't?
No.
Okay,
But I mean,
that's-
but we will
that's
clarify.
nice of Richard.
We will clarify.
Okay. Is that okay?
Well, it's not okay, but it's another lawyer, because we actually agreed on it.
Well, we don't know that yet. We're waiting to get clarification.
Yeah.
And I think that's reasonable. So
Okay,
we'll
fair
wait
enough.
on the answer. Thank you.
I will keep my introduction very brief. Suffices to say that following the tragedy at Grenfell, there were boilers underneath Grenfell Tower, which we've lost. We've used temporary boilers for the last 6 years, and this project is really all about the creation of a low energy green heating system on the Lancaster West estate, and with a view to then expanding it to other buildings as well, principally the academy and also the leisure centre. It's very important for a number of reasons. One, obviously, because it is an opportunity for us to get to meet our commitment in terms of being carbon zero, and also providing low cost heating to the residents. But it's also a very important exercise for us as a borough, because we have 26 district heat networks throughout the borough. And this gives us an opportunity in terms of learning to look at that and how we might actually go on and expand it. But I'm happy to turn to James, who is the main architect of this scheme and all the paper. James, do you want to highlight anything that you want to highlight? And then we can go to questions, Chairman.
Thank you.
Just to confirm, as much as I'd love to be an architect, I'm not actually a qualified architect.
You're not?
I understand the sentiment entirely. Thank you, Chair, current and former, for inviting what is an exciting but complex challenge here for scrutiny. Really appreciate your feedback, your questions. Do best to answer them here or take some away. I just wanted to say a couple of things which aren't in the report. And I think one is around this is very much an opportunity to, yes, invest in Lancaster West Estate because we've got these 2 end-of-life heating and hot water networks, but even more of an opportunity in the medium to longer term for this to be an investment in wider Nottingdale. As we know, 70% of the ward is social housing, and we have begun to look at opportunities to connect certainly our social housing to the network, but we're very clear that this is not core business for any council, including our own, and in many ways we need to make sure that we get phase 1, the Lancaster West Estate aspect of it, right. The other thing I would say is in terms of measures of success for the Lancaster West refurbishment, it's becoming increasingly apparent the challenges we face around the deep retrofit at Lancaster West in terms of noise and disruption, and we're doing our best to support residents through that. But the other end of this, I think, in terms of what Lancaster West residents will regard as a successful refurbishment, I think aside from new windows, I think having a heating and hot water system that is reliable and functions and is affordable is probably going to be their litmus test of a successful refurbishment. So in many ways, this is as much about the refurbishment as it is about the heat network in isolation.
Vice Chair?
Thank you very much. Thanks very much to the report up to and including Appendix A. I'd also like to thank you for the private brief we had the other night online, which was helpful as an introduction to the report with some figures behind it. I'm not sure that without Appendix B, we can do, say we have done a meaningful degree of scrutiny on this. I noticed that something's been put in front of us about 30 seconds before the meeting, which might have some figures on it, and that's where we might be able to go into more detail. But leaving that aside, the question I've got is a strategic one. What do you see at the top half a dozen risks and opportunities with this project? You don't do the exact 6, it was 5 that spring to mind, but 7 years. That's fine. What do you do with that?
Shall I pick that one up?
Go ahead.
So in terms of, if I can start in terms of how we've approached risk, there are myriad risks with any complex project, especially heat networks. And there's a lot of very high profile in housing heat networks that basically let residents to pay literally the bill for where things have gone wrong. We've taken a lot of learning from where things have gone wrong, but also equally where things have gone right. We've had some recent trips, if you will, including with residents to University of West London, Southwark, Enfield Energetic, their heat network there, where they've actually been able to reduce the prices of heating and hot water for customers as they've moved through the energy crisis, where they've approached things. We also, at the behest of the Nottingham Heat Board, brought in Masars in terms of undertaking some due diligence on the business plan assumptions here. Of course, we had a team of staff and consultants putting this. The obvious thing is the optimism bias that comes with any project that we're involved in. And they ultimately gave us a clean bill of health, not in terms of saying there's no risk, but in terms of our approach to risk. And I think to answer the question, I think the main risk at this stage is around the heat demand certainty. So by that I mean enough customers to make this viable. And this is one of the reasons why we approached the Academy, why we approached the Leisure Centre and also Baseline Business Studios, and why we've started to look ward-wide at other social housing connections, because things happen. You know, you can start digging up a road and you find something that means you can't do the connection. So that's one of the things that we've tried to do. I think the second risk, which I think will be ongoing, frankly, until we turn the new network on, is around resident support and buy-in and engagement. We've undertaken quite an extensive approach to engagement over the last 2 years. We've run polls, we've run focus groups, and in order, residents were concerned around price, reliability, and then is this really sustainable, and in that order. And price and reliability by far and away the sort of head and shoulders above. So as we've touched on in the main report and also in terms of the business plan, we've co-designed a range of measures, including a price promise, so residents aren't paid to undertake what we call a just transition for 2030. That being, if they move away from gas, they're not going to be left with footing the bill if things are higher. We've established a commitment in terms of a vulnerability policy, and we've learned from our existing heat networks, as Councillor Taylor-Smith has said, this is core business in maintaining and managing these heat networks. And we've learned from smaller blocks like Beaumont Road Apartments, where we inherited certain mini heat networks in terms of how to do things. So if somebody does run out in the middle of the night, if they're vulnerable, it's not just going to cut their heating and hot water off. So that would be the second thing. And I think the last thing will just be around the logistics in terms of construction and the fact we are not doing this in isolation. We are doing this alongside the wider refurbishment of Lancaster West. And given the proximity, of course, to the Grenfell Tower site and any future memorial, that's required us to really ramp up our approach to construction planning and logistics, and also have lots of sort of resilience and risk mitigations in place from a technical point of view. So they're probably the three.
So just looking forward 20 or 30 years to, I'm assuming it runs according to plan and is successful, it'll start turning profits and start paying for itself. But what do you think the perception of residents in 20 or 30 years' time will be when the council is making profit out of their energy?
That's an excellent question. Whether I'll be here then, I don't know. No, absolutely. Do you have something I don't, Councillor? No, so I think what we have been really clear on is in terms, the same in terms of the ask of the leadership team. This will effectively, the capital investment will only be needed once. So there's not going to be in 30, 40 years a sharp increase in major works charges for leaseholders, which is obviously something they're concerned about. There wouldn't be an ask of the council at that point because we've factored that in terms of the standing charge. And we've been really clear and baked it into the memorandum and articles of association that it is a founding principle of this company, and as you would imagine, residents are concerned about even the word company, that is there to provide affordable heat for social tenants first and foremost. And as we're all aware, residents are highly scrutinising of anything we send to council for obvious reasons. So in a way, I think that particular context has meant that we've been able to think of those sorts of questions up front and be really clear that this isn't about the council longer term profiting out of residents. It's more of a case of we would use that to invest and broaden the benefit to certainly Nottingdale and potentially even the wider borough.
Yeah, just to add to that, in terms of the principle, as James has said, everything that we've done so far, we've been really careful to do it in a way that is not just kind of consulting, but is really involved. And we've designed the kind of governance and the operation of the setup in such a way that will continue. And so I think that kind of, if and when we get to that point, the same principle would apply. That we would have a conversation with residents about the most effective way that the council could invest that money for the kind of benefit of the and that would be a decision which and of course, none of us perhaps expect to be here in 30 years, but it doesn't feel a stretch to committed principle to the fact that this is how we're setting this company up. And it seems to me that that's exactly the principle we should inform the answer to that question alongside everything else.
Thank you.
I think I would also just add in, if we were presenting this paper as an investment opportunity for the next 30 years, we wouldn't be approved. Because, obviously the capital involved in this, and also risk associated with this, it's not something we've set out in terms of making a profit.
And that's an important point for another reason, sorry to interrupt, which is that one of the reasons we're doing this ourselves because there wasn't really an option where we could kind of outsource it to a private provider for exactly that reason. There isn't a kind of profit margin to be made here that would make sense in any kind of commercial assessment by a private company. So if we want to do this, we have to do it as a kind of publicly driven enterprise that is not constantly profit motivated. Is that right?
Yeah. And I will add as well, just in terms of the resident assurance piece. So we have two residents, or in the terms of sort of company governance, potential customers on the board of Nottingham Heath. They're 2 of the 6 board members, and we would expand to wider Nottingham. We would, as the vacancies come up, we would offer that as well. We believe that the only heat network in the country that has taken that sort of step. So we've got resident voices, like a sticker rock really through every opportunity of where things are discussed. And I must say, the Residents Association especially been highly involved in attending every board meeting. Again, I think we've got a better project as a result of that scrutiny.
Thank you, James. Chair, I've got Councillor Garland's questions, which is probably better if we go on to the rest of the committee and then come back, just in case she arrives.
Sure.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Before we do go on, I'd just like to say I've made a slight faux pas and forgotten something. I wanted at the start of this meeting to offer a vote of thanks to the outgoing chair, Councillor Ali.
Agreed.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ali, and thank you very much.
And if I say Greg haven't done, I wouldn't have done the work I have done without his support.
So yes, I think that makes good sense. So shall we start with?
Yeah, I have some questions about the finance because I don't quite understand it. So if someone could explain it to me, I'll just go rapidly through certain things. Firstly, altogether, how much is this going to cost? And then, if this is meant to last the system for 60 years, at what point does it start paying for itself? And then on page 17, we have funding allocation is a combined 14-year council annuity loan, which is repayable on commercial terms and equity investment. So we've got a loan, we've got an equity investment, and commercial terms presumably at the moment is about 6%, I would have thought, for how much you will have to repay. So what I don't quite get is how it all, and then there's a grant of 1.1 million. So I don't quite get how, where all the money's coming from. And there's a council loan and there's a bridging loan, and how much the rate is going to be paid, interest rate is going to be paid for that. And me looking at it now, it looks to me you've got a lot more loan than equity, but I could be wrong because you're not actually, the figures don't sort of make sense to me, so.
So happy to pick that up. So it's a shame because we've got a table that literally explains everything that you've asked. So if I might, I'm happy to circulate that to the committee. No, it's hot off the press because the first question, which I will answer, has been subject to the outcomes of a procurement exercise, a two-stage procurement exercise.
Yeah.
In as far as that is just being finalised for recommendation and due to be published. To answer the first question, is £27 million is the capital expenditure required. Broadly speaking, that consists of a roughly £1.1 million non-returnable government grant. Then there is a substantial input from the housing revenue account.
So a 1.1 million grant.
Government grant, that's right,
Okay,
in terms of the capital expenditure. The housing revenue account side of things is about £17 million, 17, that would otherwise need to be invested to replace the like for like. And then the remainder is comprised of connection charges from some of the other customers. And as you referred to, there's a small amount of equity and there is a loan which enables the council to basically make a return on the initial upfront and capital expenditure that is required. In terms of the exact rate, I would need to defer to finance colleagues on Treasury as to what that looks like.
You say you've got a tape, does it actually stack up? Because I don't understand what's in front of us here in terms of exactly how much is borrowed. So the ratio between equity and loans, what's that?
So I don't know if you were able to attend the all council briefing, but there was a deck. I don't know if that has been circulated yet. I've got it in front of me actually. And that has that level of detail. So the loan is more than the equity, that much I can remember. I don't think it's quite that high. But to answer the question on payback, that would be 41 years is the forecast payback. So
Okay.
I can provide all of that to the committee. There's no reason
That's
why.
quite a long time, isn't it?
Yes, and that's going back to the point that it's not something that the private sector would be interested in. And when you think of HRA, business plans are typically over 30 years, so it's not totally out of kilter with the way that certainly social housing models its investment flow.
Thank you.
Yes, my question is, you touched upon communication, consultation and engagement. I wonder if you can give us a bit more detail about who it was, how many people were involved with, how many people got back to you, how popular was it, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so I think there has been stages to this, and I think we've referred to in the report, I would say quite a conservative cut of what we've done. So we held a resident poll in summer 2021, which was the point where we could share sort of first principles, how would it work technically, what would replace the gas boilers and so on and so forth. At that point, I think we got in excess of 96 residents respond, which isn't many, but when you think Lancaster West is only 826 homes, so that counts the sample, and we got 86% of people in support of a new renewable heat network. And that was before we co-designed the price promise. In terms of what some of the co-design engagement looked like, we've had postal surveys, we held a working group of a number, we had block representatives on Lancaster West. We're fortunate, we've got a lot of people really passionate about their homes and wider estate and wider area. We've held a number of focus groups and webinars where we have held refurbishment specific engagement on blocks. So we're on site at the moment at Treadgold House, which was the council's first a deep retrofit to carbon zero. So as part of that, we basically brought the heat network engagement in to that process as well. We've obviously had statutory events in terms of we're about to go to planning. We've held a drop in there in terms of some early concept design to feed into that. And that was with the wider community as well. That had over 100 people attend. We've approached as many of the local groups, and of course the ward councillors have fed in at various points as well, because we recognise that for many residents, given the proximity to the tower and any future memorial, this is an area where a lot of people have a lot of interest. So we have worked also with the Grenfell Town Memorial Commission, their members and their secretariat, and we've involved, I think most crucially, residents throughout the whole process of the procurement. So 2 or 3 residents have been involved in the questions we asked, scoring, the interviews, so that we've got residents at every key stage, as well as our quarterly refurbishment programme board, chaired by the deputy leader, which ward councillors attend as well. Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions from me. 2 specific questions on section 4. I just follow up on the points Councillor North made. In relation to point 4.2, how does the 10% compare to any previous surveys on the estate? It's difficult to get an idea in the abstract, but actually sounds low. Could it be a quite a good number? How does it compare?
That's an excellent question, if I might say. So elsewhere, 10% engagement would be regarded as satisfactory to good. On Lancaster West, for all the various reasons, not least that I think as a neighbourhood team we've got a lot better at it, we've been able to engage up to 80% of residents in particular scenarios, but mainly where that's affecting people's homes. And it's not unusual, it's something that is quite abstract to people in terms of, think of their heating as what they turn on and off, where they're able to, and their radiators. We've been talking a lot about business plans, price promises, energy centres, air source heat pumps. And so I don't think it's unusual, in line with other sort of similar discussions, that we haven't had that level of engagement. But as I mentioned, there are things that we have done where we have had in excess of that, and indeed we're currently out to ask the explicit question of residents on 200 homes of the estate: do you support this package of works? To try and build that momentum, certainly in terms of planning, certainly within the community. There are a lot of people who are anxious about the level of disturbance that are being caused. So we've done far better, I suppose, but it's by no means an insignificant portion if you think of various other polls that go on in society.
Thank you. Just a couple other questions, if I may, Chairman. In relation to point 4.5, I note that the Lancaster West Residents Association have been engaged in all these meetings, which is of course proper. They are a legally constituted residents association. However, I do know not all residents feel part of that association or like it represents them. So I just want to know, have any residents of the estate, armed members of LWRA, be included in those meetings listed in 4.5?
Absolutely. Again, another excellent question. So the recent refurbishment programme board, we've had someone attend that who is no longer on the RA committee. In terms of board meetings, they are public meetings, and we have advertised them. Again, not unusually for board meetings. We've not had the best take-up. Of course, we've got the 2 resident board members who, neither of whom are on the RA committee as well. I think what we've tried to do, especially at this moment in time, is to provide other ways for people to feed in, to rather rely on board meetings necessarily, or program boards and so on, to try and distill that feedback. So I would say, the RA are absolutely recognised constituted body, and we work with them closely on a daily basis. But what we've tried to do for various reasons is really get as many people as possible to feed into everything we do. So not just this.
And then just one final question, if I may, Chair. In relation to paragraph 5.2 in terms of the Goodbye Gas programme. Whilst it sounds good, I do know that in the survey that is right at the bottom of residents' concerns. Only 2% say wanting to remove gas from the home is a concern, yet 30% say cost and billing is a concern. I mean, what it costs £2,000 for each refit. Why not just take that off residents' bill? If 30% of residents say cost and billing is a much more important concern, why are we spending money on something that comes at the bottom of that survey?
That's another good question. So I think the first part of that is about the strategic policy direction in terms of gas nationally, is that we won't be able to replace gas. And so from a leaseholder perspective, in terms of charging, if we were to replace gas now and then in 5-6 years' time, it might be sooner than that, we're then legally required to swap it out, which is coming for public buildings, so it will come for residential. Then for leaseholders, that will mean paying twice, and you haven't even got the full usage in terms of your capital expenditure. I think that particular poll, that is one approach to things. We've got a lot of residents who are absolutely committed to the carbon neutral side of things. There is no way any landlord can get its housing carbon neutral if you're still combusting gas in your homes or around them. So that again fits in with the wider piece in terms of council policy. And in terms of the intricacies of what might be seen as a bit of a giveaway, if you will, we can't charge, we've looked into the legalities of this, we can't actually charge residents for the removal of gas. It is be considered an improvement, bizarrely, but in leaseholder terms. And so what we've tried to do, because we recognise, going back to the risk question, that is going to want to be one of the biggest challenges, is front load the removal of gas as soon as possible. So take the walkways, 366 properties, half of them have got gas running into them purely for their cooker. So you've got gas supplies running throughout, the visible gas piping, the secondary network was mentioned in the inquiry. I've not seen in my career for a very long time the gas pipes that run through the walkway. So there's also safety aspects to things as well. So the people actively wanting to remove gas is just one lens. There are other motivations as well, and it's been shortlisted for a national Unlock Net Zero award, that particular initiative, and we wait 2 weeks' time to see what the outcome of that is.
Yeah, and if we're serious about carbon zero, we've got to do this. And there's no question about that. We have to take gas out of gas cookers, and some people are reluctant to do that, and a lot of people like using gas cookers. But I must say that the reaction that we've had on our induction cookers has been very good. It's quite good, quick, instant heat, so it's changing habits.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any residents, any questions from members of the public on this?
I'd just like to say I'm very in favour of all these net zero initiatives for Lanc West and surrounding blocks. But I'd like to know when it's going to be rolled out to the rest of the borough and the skills that are transferred.
Well, in answer to that question, carbon zero is not just a question of heat source. It's obviously very much in insulation, and that we have a programme where we've got extensive work going on in terms of insulation of our buildings. As far as the rolling out across the network, I mentioned before, we've got 26 district systems that we would, over time, seek to. But there's a large capital cost in doing that. Yesterday, I went and had a tour around Silchester. It's an estate which is going to be subject to major refurbishments. And in that refurbishment programme, we haven't got in the first phase removal of gas boilers, because all of the flats have individual gas boilers, and that's purely because of cost. So I can't sit here and give you the exact timetable of when gas is being removed by each individual estate. We're dealing with the M&E issues first in terms of rooms and lifts and electrics, and fire safety is the priority at the moment. But along the way, obviously, you'll see the benefit of removing gas from our estates.
I think I'm right in saying the most recent round of funding that we've secured from government, from the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, is for a scope of work that goes beyond Lancaster West. So we have been using Lancaster West kind of very clearly and explicitly as the kind of priority here, and to a certain extent the test bed for things we want to do more widely. But we are now moving that out, and that's just one example.
Absolutely, and I mean, at all levels of government now, most of this borough is identified as a heat network opportunity, and locally within the borough, Nottingdale and practically all of North Kensington, and certainly World's End Estate have been identified as areas which are subject to the investment that the Deputy Leader's outlined, particularly opportune in terms of connected to a heat network.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I'd just like to come back about green hydrogen. What about using green hydrogen when that eventually gets into the gas networks?
Yeah, so the biggest proponents of green hydrogen are fossil fuel companies. Let people draw their own conclusions to that, but certainly I was at a meeting recently with the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, and there absolutely is a role for green hydrogen, probably in industry, defence industries in particular, and vehicles, but in terms of residential dwellings, for various reasons, it's increasingly being seen as something that doesn't have any of the incentives that the government's tried to introduce on heat networks. So it doesn't look like a solution on residential dwellings, but it will probably be part of the energy mix.
And also we looked at alternative, we have evaluated different types of heating system. This one we're going is an air source, we've looked at ground source, we've even looked at harnessing the pattern of sewage. But, you know, in terms of reliability and cost, air source is the way we're going to go on this. But over time, these technologies will change.
Well, that's the thing, is that a large part of the investment is in the kind of pipe work which transports the heat and water to and from buildings. That is completely agnostic about what the source of energy is. And so while the investment in the pipe work has a life through the kind of 40, 60 years that we're talking about, the heat pump has a life which is shorter than that. And there'll be an opportunity, if the technology has moved on at the point where that is in its life, to change the technology without having to do an investment on the scale that we're talking about now, because all of that pipe work will be in.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of points, if I may. Before I begin, I'd like to make a couple of general points which don't just apply to you guys, but hopefully to all officers, which is when I see percentages, I like to see the sample size that goes with that, or the total, you call it. Just one more cosmetic thing. I don't really want to see the word wider appearing in reports. Unless we're talking about physical width and physical object. Just because of the recent historical sensitivities around that word, and while I can see it's very useful for internal comms, I just think external and public facing, there are other ways to identify who we're talking about. So to my questions, first of all, a quick one. Does the Memorandum and Article of Association of Nottingdale Heat Network Limited, to give it its full name, does that limit the number of directors? Does it specify?
It does. There is headroom. I think if we can go up to 9, and it's the composition is detailed. So I think,
2 and 2.
yes, and I think we would be looking at an independent chair, subject to financial investment decision. And then I think also, I think there may well be some headroom in there on the basis of expansion to Nottingdale.
You know what I'm thinking?
Yes, I know where you're coming. Yeah, absolutely. And we've had that discussion with the relevant local actors around this. We've called it Nottingdale Heat Network for a reason. We haven't called it Lancaster West Heat Network.
Well,
And,
that is noted.
yes.
And
I'll discuss that.
the questions we have, yes.
Yeah, so this is an attempt to overcome the risks and impacts that the historic naming of certain initiatives has caused. And, you know, I'm really, I think the positive is, as we've heard tonight, we've got residents from beyond Lancaster West in Nottingdale coming to us and saying, can we connect, particularly for some of the nearby blocks. So I think this, obviously we've got to get phase 1 out of the way. I think there's a real positive opportunity here for the board as it is a whole.
Thank you. And that takes me to my second question, which is about the phase 2, where we've talked here on section 4 about co-design and resident engagement. We're actually, although it's, in some ways we're at an early stage, we're actually quite far progressed in the preparations of this. And whether it be in Nottingdale Heat Network, not many Nottingdale residents have been featuring in the consultation of the 96 people. So hopefully, I'm sure this will be the case, when we come to phase 2, in a way we are informing, because this is thin already, we're not asking, but actually hopefully there can be just some genuine co-design with the residents of Nottingdale as a group. And the other thing, just for those members of the committee who weren't able to attend the online briefing last week, which was very helpful and informative, if we can have those slides, that would be really great. But I noticed in that heat networks work best when with about 2,000 properties. And with that infrastructure, you can probably add about 200 with the same infrastructure. Beyond that, you'd want to have more infrastructure. So when we are going to phase 2, I'm envisaging that will be an additional infrastructure cost. And of course, in the lovely map, which I think is at the back of this paper where it says what is a heat network, on page 289, you can see that it requires underground pipes. And so that will be, this phase 1 will not be including underground pipes to places which will be in phase 2.
Shall I come back on that one? Yeah, so, all good. I'm glad my briefing clearly
always
landed.
yeah,
Brilliant,
absolutely.
excellent. That's fantastic feedback. So, there was a map which was really hard to see at the back of the desk. I have shared it with the governance officer, so I think that'll be shortly shared. It's probably better, Chair, we look close up, but the primary pipes, the underground pipes, will be running around the roads, around Lancaster West, obviously on the other side of those roads, and just to give you some examples, Allen Barlow houses, Nottingwood, and so on, they're already there. So to an extent, and to sort of try and define what that opportunity poses, and some of that capital investment will be taking place, to expand again to the same amount of homes, or same amount of heat, I should say, we're providing here, would be about a third of the capital investment cost. So because a lot of the pipe work's there, we've got the energy, so we would need more, we'd probably need another air source heat pumps, depending on scale. Coming back to the co-design point, I would entirely endorse a similar approach, notwithstanding certain things would have been locked in effectively. But for me, it's absolutely important in the ward, as you know more than I do, to get a sense of resident consent and buy-in. I think that's likely to be on a block-by-block basis, just in terms of the technical rollout and the Landscape Capital Programme. Certainly, we've had some very informal discussions with Allen Barlow, Nottingwood and Bramley House, for example, but once we're at the point of potentially looking at expansion, if that is something that we secure return on endorsement to do, we would absolutely formalise that and look to take a similar approach as we've done on Lancaster West.
Could I just also chip in on that? I mean, I think we're going to need to have a really long and hard think when we go to phase 2. I mean, phase 1 is relatively straightforward because you're connecting into an existing network and you have potential add-ons for the leisure centre and the academy, which is a single user. When you start going further afield and putting pipework in with no guarantee that you're going to a building that somebody's going to give up their boiler for, then obviously we're really going to have to be in a position whereby we can sell the benefits from cost and show reliability as well. So, I think it gives me comfort the fact that we have this break within phase 1, even to go to the academy and to the leisure centre, allows us to make sure that we get it working. First of all, as far as our residents are concerned, we can see what the benefits are and the costs, and then we'll be able to sell the next service. So we won't be rushing for phase 2.
No. So what that means is that although this is called the Nottingdale Heat Network and it's in the name of the ward, ward-wide, there is an element of uncertainty and risk concerning the execution of phase 2, because there are too many unknowns at this point. That be fair?
Well, yeah, no, I mean we're going in.
Because I do go to the paper,
we're going.
see a lot of caveats.
Yes. No, as I say, we're going into this with a view to this is the future, something that the government is going to be very much encouraging us to do and start supporting networks. We're doing this at an early stage. I'm just giving a degree of caution in terms of when we go to that second phase. But certainly the aspiration is not to leave just where it is.
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted to clarify that. And finally, just one very quick final question before we move to Councillor Gardner. On the connection charges, these obviously apply to the academy and the leisure centre. Are we saying that residents will have a connection charge also?
Non-individual residents, no. The housing revenue account, which of course tenants pay into, will. So the connection charge, what it essentially means is in lieu of the housing revenue account having to buy its own air source boiler, it transfers to the company because it's responsible for.
But it's at the landlord level, not the individual.
Yes. So there's no additional costs in that way, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Gardner, welcome.
Yes, my apologies for being late.
Not at all. I understand that you have some comments or questions on this agenda item
I didn't sell your sandwiches. I didn't steal your sandwiches. I did mine, and then I thought we'd leave yours to the end in case you got it.
Thank you. Apologies if they've already covered. Can I just talk about the parent company guarantee? So you're talking about the total liability cap for the DVOM contract and the design build contracts. This is a board over which the council are in the minority. The board.
Single shareholder.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes. But the board.
The board, yes.
Minority. So where's the comfort for the council that there is control over what it is guaranteeing? And also, with various contracts that need design build, you often find there's a contingency or there's an overrun. So how are we giving residents who are on the other side of the equation, i.e. not the recipients of the service, but the other residents of the borough, the comfort that this isn't a deep hole pocket as a guarantee? And separately, how do you ensure that the shareholder committee isn't a set of shadow directors by virtue of what work they do?
I can probably at least start the answer to the second of the question. So James, you've got more to say the first one. In setting up the governance of the company and establishing the shareholder committee, which is a kind of new enterprise for the council as well, we've set out a kind of clear matrix of delegations, which is really clear about who's responsible for what, if you see what I mean. So what is the responsibility starting, as it were, at the lowest level of the staff of the company, and then stepping up a step, what's the responsibility of the board of the company, and then up a step, what's the responsibility of the shareholders. So everyone has reference to that, as it were. I mean, there may well be issues where we need to kind of make adjustments, but that's the starting principle that makes clear what everyone's lane is, if you like. So far, and I think I'm right in saying that we started off, if you like, with a kind of orthodox traditional way of doing it, and then we looked at it from the council point of view and asked the version of the question you're asking, I think, which is, are we, when we look at this and the powers that we have as the council rather than as the nominatory minister, do we have the controls that we want here, whereby we're protecting our investment and protecting the outcomes that we want to achieve, both of which are really important, without reaching too deeply into, without keeping a dog and barking ourselves, effectively. And we're happy, and the advice we've given to members is that the delegations matrix that we set up does strike that balance. But I think the other thing to say is, because this is a kind of this idea of running something through an arm's length company, something of this nature, at least in this way, is new to the council. We're going to need to keep that under review. And we've got the option as the shareholder to vary that if we decide that we need to make tweaks to it. James, do you want to pick up a bit more on the detail on that point and the first one?
So just a few points around that. So on the contingency, I think in this paper, we talk about 15%. We've had feedback from other stakeholders, and probably for the reasons you're suggesting, that contingency would be reduced to 5%, and it wouldn't be able to go beyond that without the, it would need to go through the board in the first instance and then to the shareholder committee. So there is no way that the company would be able to spend into a black hole or deep hole, as you put it. Also, in terms of the design and build elements, are what's called the tertiary and secondary networks, of the bits in people's homes and the blocks. That's going to be delivered directly through the council's part of the refurbishment, and we're still reviewing at the moment the counterparty would be the council. So at the point of financial investment decision, it would be the council. Central government is driving the creation of these companies so that we get wider benefit. It's not just social housing that is necessarily benefiting from heat networks, and we are taking learnings from other heat networks around the country. There have been ones that have delivered the contract through the council in terms of the works. There are those that have basically given it all in terms of the company. So we are assessing things from that perspective. In terms of the board makeup, we took learning to ensure that all the pros and cons of having different compositions are considered. So we've talked about the residents. We've got 2 board nominees at the moment, and that can increase by 1, I believe. And in terms of the heat network expertise, we've learned that is extremely important because this isn't council core business. So we've tried to strike the right balance so that we get the best of all worlds and balance the risk. But of course, in terms of the financial investment decision, that parent company guarantee is so that even when the council novates across to Nottingdale Heath, the contractor can go, okay, if you go bust or whatever, you were able to sort of deal with that. So it's just to give the contractor certainty that whoever the novated counterparty happens to be, we will still get to pay what they've contracted for.
Yes, I think my question, I used to do all company guarantees for my firm. So my question is cap on liability and a term. If indeed Notting Hill, the company then makes a profit, at what stage do we say, actually we can stand back, we can withdraw this guarantee? Because they cut, and that may be done in the future. But my concern is that if you've always got this sort of trampoline beneath you, safety net, at what stage do you take your responsibilities and do you actually not think, I've always got council guarantee behind it? Because there will be things that, by virtue of the way you set up the board, that the council doesn't have control over, and those board members have to act in the best interests of that company, not the council. So you're kind of going, if I've always got a company guarantee to fall back on, I'm pretty relaxed.
Yeah, just a kind of moral hazard.
Yeah. Can I ask one technical question? Am I right, this is a heat source pump?
SLC heat pump.
And the noise from it. So what are you doing? Because I gather a lot of them create noise that isn't expected. And so how are you looking to...
Certainly the older ones do. So it's a planning requirement to look in terms of noise, and we are trying to not just get below that planning requirement, do everything we can to minimise the noise. We've been, as I was saying earlier, we did some site visits in terms of comparably sized air source heat pumps. We took a decibel reader with us, we videoed them and so on. The modern ones are a lot quieter. We are, in terms of location, that's one of the reasons why our preferred location is on the roof of Kensington Aldridge Academy. I've just come from a meeting with them earlier in terms of negotiating what would be acceptable to them as an alternative to putting it on one of our residential dwellings. We were looking at the leisure centre instead. It's slightly louder than a substation, but the ones that I've seen, it's not as loud as one would think. Not that I can quantify exactly how many decibels that is, but it's something we're absolutely taking seriously and looking to design out. We'll be looking at acoustic baffle boards and then the architectural treatment around it as well.
So because that's the one that's going to come back and bite you when some of the residents go, what is this noise? It will be people.
And so in terms of sort of a pilot to this, if you will, Treadgold House will have the first large air source heat pump on top of it in terms of about sort of 6 months time. We will understand that, but we have got a couple of air source heat pumps adjacent to residential dwelling. They're quieter than an air conditioning unit, just to sort of try and we've had no complaints on noise, albeit they're very small.
Thank you very much. So I think that brings us to the end of this item. Thank you everyone for a very fruitful and productive discussion. Thank you. I think one of the main concerns that we have as committees around risk in general, various aspects of it. And I wonder, would it be possible for us to see the Mazars collective findings? I think that might be helpful. And I think I don't know how the committee feel in terms of making some recommendation to protect or insulate the residents from those aspects of the risk. What do you think, everybody?
How it would be formulated, and that's quite a difficult thing to formulate on the fly.
Well, I think once we've seen the documents.
Yes. Risk to residents or risk to council?
Well, the residents of the council that Councillor Garden is referring to, council is generally across the borough, and also in particular the residents of Lancaster West, who, as Dan has said, this is a test bed. We do have quite a lot of unknowns.
Risk, I mean, in my mind, there's two risks. There's one, the risk of not having a heating system not working, and the second one, I'm not sure how there'd be a financial risk. And we've obviously given certain price commitments to people in terms of wanting to live to ensure, obviously, that what we're doing is competitive. So I'm not quite sure what other
So, for instance, hypothetically, let's just say that if it was over budget for any reason, or unforeseen thing that you might pick up the road and find over something, as you mentioned before, that those costs will not be passed to residents because the part of the loan that's being serviced from the HRA, from customers being supplied with the energy.
I wonder if this is something that if it depends on getting some material back.
I think it does.
Perhaps it's something that ought to be formulated offline, maybe once we've got the material, we could have a go at drafting.
Then it might be more obvious and
I was just asking if you also have table you referring to with the breakdown of the finances, because I think that would be helpful.
And I think I've taken that as a takeaway. I think, because this is going to go obviously to leadership or decision, is that we need to set out the business case in a slightly clearer way, incorporating that information so people can see very clearly what the investment is, where the money is coming from, which within the report you have to. So I think that's something which we will certainly take away and do.
And the final thing I'd say is that obviously we are really keen to get your input in July, but that is obviously, as it were, it's the end of part of the story, but it's the beginning of another part of the story, and so there'll be plenty more opportunity for you to reflect on and give input into the project as it continues to develop. If you see what I mean. So I'm assuming we'll be talking about this here again at other points in time.
Over the next 30 years.
30 months. Thank you all very much. And shall now move to the next agenda item, which is the scene setting reports. I'm aware we're running ever so slightly behind, but I think that was because it's a really important item to be for
I'll
time.
put a bit of pace in this one, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay, so quick introduction. And I thought this was a good paper for me because it highlighted a number of things and also highlighted a number of risks. Within the report, there's a number of numbers which, again, are worth just repeating. The report covers the three departments that comes under Dan's Directorate of Housing Management. Again, it records the fact that we're going to be spending £70 million this year as we ramp up. The overall investment is say of 620 million, and we're doing that over 30 locations. It's important to remember that this is a lot of disruption to people, and we're seeing that now. It's all well and good when we're on the Lancaster West giving people acoustic noise cancelling headphones, but there's still going to be a lot of disruption. We've obviously got to accommodate things such as the Social Housing Charter, the Building Safety Act, which we've been very much ahead of as far as housing management is concerned. During our homes, as I say, we've been talking today about carbon zero. And risks here are, again, very much monetary ones. We've seen significant costs, which we're having to obviously absorb. We're also seeing, when it comes to our tenants, the impact of those costs as well, particularly related on heating. On social investment, again, 600 new homes, our programme, first phase, 97 homes. We named our first building, Kelso Cockrell Home, and then we're doing allocations to that now on Kensal Road. And I'm very pleased and proud of what we've got. But it's when we come to talk about housing allocation and housing needs, you can see that we're running against a very strong tide. We have a portfolio of 697 properties over £1 billion, a big portfolio. And again, we're approaching that in a slightly different way, considering issues in terms of social investment and social value of what we're doing with our properties, but that's not forgetting that this is a big driver to the financing of the council and on our services. We have to have that balance going through. Again, in terms of housing needs, under COJO, that splits down into a number of places. We've obviously got Housing Solution, which manages the overall demand. 5,512 cases we had presented to this council, 22-23, that's an awful lot. And it's an increase of 30% of the previous year. We're seeing, again, a lot of demand coming to us. That actually translated to 1,437 actual homeless cases which were accepted in terms of duty. 70% of those are coming from single people. Again, the majority of demand, the majority of people sitting on our TA waiting list of 3,100 are single people. And we're having to address that by seeking more and more temporary accommodation, 80% of which is out of borough. And the cost of that temporary accommodation is one of the big risks and the big challenges we have at the moment in terms of how we find it. Housing strategy is the other aspect of what under CODO's directorate, which is really dealing with allocations and how we do that. Here we also have a new allocation scheme, which we've now just approved. There's very much a focus on encouraging and preventing homelessness and also looking at alternative accommodation to get people into secure homes. That does not necessarily mean secure homes within this borough because of social housing, the lack of stock that we've got. But you know, that's something which we're looking at doing. There were a total of 397 lettings last year, so you equate that in terms of the number of people in our housing waiting list, and you can see that obviously we've got an average wait time at the moment of 5 years, so on larger bedroom size that's even harder. These are all really, really difficult facts to deal with. You know, our housing stock, again, we've got 7,025 under social rent. The residents' associations, RPs have got 11,600. They're much more than we do. And what we're seeing at the moment, again, is we're seeing people applying an asset management strategy similar to what we've been discussing today about greening and making decisions to actually shed stock within the borough, which again is a worry for us. So finding these homes, you know, is a very critical thing for us. Challenging the developers of the large schemes that are coming, and I know these are going to be unpopular with people where they're doing these large schemes, but it is really our only opportunity for us to find socially rented homes of any size and volume. You know, we're pretty much building out everything else we've got. I think that's probably it in terms of a quick canter through in scene setting. I don't know, Dan or Kojo, if under your various parts of the director you wanted to add anything to that.
I think so.
Otherwise, we're happy to go.
Obviously, happy to. Well, I mean, this report's here principally to inform the decisions you guys are making about your work.
Yeah.
There's a temptation which maybe we all need to resist about diving too deep into any of these topic areas. But I'm obviously very happy to answer any questions which will help inform your decisions about what you want to focus on. If that makes sense.
Exactly that. I was just going to remind everyone that the scene setting reports inform the Committee of Service Priorities for the upcoming year, and where scrutiny enrolment would be most helpful. So I have made a note. So on page 34, 46 and 42, just for that's where the suggestions and recommendations, possible scrutiny items have been listed. I'm going to go to the Vice Chair first for any comments and questions.
It's just some few minor observations on the paper. Paragraph 5.1 for the social investment strategy paper, I think that's going back for scrutiny PLC.
It is, that's correct, yeah.
So I won't let that detain me any further. The next one I wanted to mention, I'm going to jump around the time a bit, 6.15, the relationship with the RPs. Could we please have a date with the public forum with the RPs or the council's forum with the RP early? It's probably got dates for the RP forums throughout the year anyway. We have the public one with the councillors fairly soon, so we can plan around it, because sadly, I had a private meeting this year, and I know it's really useful now. Everyone really gets a lot of value out of it.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, and I was very pleased with the last one we had. I thought it was well attended and very
well attended, but not by me, I'm afraid. And I was really furious, but I regard it as a success that you as a team have taken it on as the executive and we're doing it. The other sort of point, and it's not really mentioned in the paper, the chair and I were talking about it. There's a theme that sort of how do we communicate with our residents, how do we communicate with our potential residents, our applicants, what's the tone there? And I don't know if that's something that we altered our into or something. The theme I noticed once it was about 3 years ago, I commented on papers from the department, possibly before your time down, I don't know, the paper was fine, but the proposed letter for residents was appalling, and I wrote 306. I can't remember what it is, but it was just wrong. It was, and I don't know, hopefully that was a one-off.
I don't think it was, but it's something we work on a lot. Is your interest in that housing specific or kind of more general across council services? And either's fine, but it might inform precisely
Specifically
how
housing, I'm specifically thinking housing because it uses the committee. I mean, otherwise it's not certain.
Yeah.
And we've got the housing department in front of us.
This is something I've also raised.
Yeah.
That there's this work that can be done.
And if you wanted to have a kind of focused conversation about that, I'm sure we could find a way to kind of perhaps to kind of generally describe the approach we've taken, some of the changes we've made in recent years. I think probably, going back to the story you told, we could probably also provide, if it's helpful, some examples of things we think are good, but also some things that we've rooted out that weren't so good, if you see what I mean, to give you a sense of kind of what some of those changes have looked like.
And
If that kind of thing is of interest, I'm sure we can be happy to.
Perhaps some of us could do the same in terms of what we see in our case law. Let's just receive by residents.
I know that's something we've been doing some work on. I think always a really good case in question is an eviction notice. You know, we have a statutory responsibility to do it in a particular way, but the letter itself is different. You know, if somebody's getting that letter without a covering explanation, it can be quite, distressing, and that's something which we've sort of addressed. Sorry, yeah.
No. So we have the residents reference group, which is held once a month, and recently we've been engaging a piece of work with them about self-comms. So an example, a few meetings ago, what we did was we, Councillor Smith referenced our eviction notice, but we looked at our rent arrears letters, and the customer access team actually presented it to the residents reference group, and got some information from them about their views about the style. And there was things in there about how, so for example, if it was a follow notice, it had it may have a red heading, and the residents were speaking about how it impacted on them. So we are looking at our letters across housing needs and how we can adapt some of those resident needs. I did make it clear that there are some things which by law we're mandated to have within our letters. However, we can still look at the language in a way in which we can include the letters, so we're doing a piece of work. As Dan said, we can have a deep dive into that.
I'm not sure how or in what format we do that, but it's something I think we're interested in.
We're always interested in feedback on that as well. Like it's a constant priority for improvement. So we reach.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gardner.
I have 3 points. One is a general point, and it's about this and also sort of being, which is the timing of this. I would have loved this 2 weeks ago when we were having our informal work programme setting meeting, because frankly it's too late coming up with this meeting, because as you see there's paper A7 which sets out what we've already thought about, and actually some of these could have been quite helpful. We haven't seen. So perhaps.
Well, we can work with the scrutiny team on changing the cycle.
No, but I was actually
Thank you for putting your hand up, Jeff.
for next year, could we have it almost just after the AGM so that actually it's there? Thank you. A couple of specifics. On page 36, you talk about the social investment strategy, and that you're approving it and implementing it in July. Why isn't it on this agenda?
Because the decision that's been taken, as Councillor Howard referenced, I think by the Open and Scrutiny Committee, is that because it reaches council wide, it's being looked at by the Open and Scrutiny Committee. So it's on the agenda for the 5th of July meeting of the Open and Scrutiny Committee, rather than being within the kind of jurisdiction of this committee, if you see what I mean. I think, again, not a decision I was directly involved in, but I think it's kind of
Jackie. Discussion with Councillor Wheel and Councillor Ali when he was chairing this committee, because it was a KD that spanned 2 committees and we only do scrutiny in one place, and it was agreed with the 2 chairs that it would go to the Open committee.
So had Councillor Hammond not mentioned it because he sits on that committee, I would be none the wiser. So how do we keep our committee, the committee who's not individually scrutiny on that, aware of what's happening? So again, that's something to take away with it.
But to the extent that it's any comfort, yes, we're taking the strategy itself to the leadership team, or to the review on the 5th, and then leadership team on the 12th of July. But its implementation will be a life's work, if you see what I mean. So that, and there are probably specific issues to do with its implementation, specifically, for example, in the realm of property and housing, which I think could legitimately be looked at by this committee in the future. If you see. So I don't think it's a kind of if we do this right, it will be a theme that runs throughout the work of the council for years to come. So I think this is yes, the strategy has been dealt with in that way, but I don't think the individual elements of its implementation necessarily need to be. If you decide you want to look at some of those bits, for example, in housing.
And finally, forgive me, can't quite remember if it's in this paper, but you talk about lots of the private landlords seeking their premises, rent rises. What progress are we making on that? Because that's actually, I assume, as worrying for you as it is for us.
Kojo and I both attended there was some really interesting research on this that was commissioned by the kind of collective of London housing directors from Savills and the University of UCL, one of the London universities, and because we're still struggling to understand exactly what's going on in London's rental market. It looks like it looks like the main driver of what's happening in the rental market, and just to be clear about what is happening. There is a particular shrinking of the number of homes at the lower end of the kind of private rented market, i.e. the end of the market which is affordable to someone on housing benefit. And that's kind of hurts us for two reasons, because first of all, it increases the number of households in London who are then homeless and vulnerable to homelessness because they can't afford a private rented home. But it then hurts us again because when those families come to us for support, we will try and find them a private tenancy, either to discharge their duty or to put them in temporary accommodation. And again, we can't do that precisely because of that same problem in the market. There's that whole range of factors driving it. So there's kind of pent up demand from the COVID pandemic. There's a lot of people who didn't move to London during the pandemic are either moving or moving back to London at one go, which is driving up demand, driving prices up. It does also look like there's been a kind of creeping rise in rented homes being put on the kind of short-term holiday let market, and also because of the shortage of social rented housing and the kind of increasing inaccessibility of market housing to buy, more and more households are staying in private rent because their other options are closing off. So a household that might expect to buy in their 30s, say, that's my generation, is renting for much longer now, which means the kind of the turnover of private rented accommodation schemes. So all of that is driving what seems to be a kind of growing mismatch between supply and demand. And you add to that, of course, the fact that mortgages are going up, which means that landlords are going to be passing on higher rents to their tenants. There's a kind of combination of factors which are contributing to a bit of a perfect storm. And I think we now understand that picture better than we did, although certainly not perfectly because of the complex interplay of all those factors. And it's what was really clear from the conversation yesterday is that this is a London-wide issue. It's not a Kensington and Chelsea specific issue. Of course, because of the prices of Kensington and Chelsea, we have it bad. Although I don't think we have it. There are the pressures we're facing. For example, where we're having to put households in hotels, commercial hotels, rather than in temporary accommodation, which we can't find. We're struggling with that, but there are some that are struggling even more. But it's I'm sitting here right now. It's really hard to know. It's really hard to see what our route through it is. The kind of one's instinctive reaction, which is something we talked to Councillor Smith about a lot, is that obviously the more social rented homes we've got access to, the better, because that increases the flow of people out of temporary accommodation. But also to the extent that that's not possible, it would always be our preference to own our own temporary accommodation, because then we can control. We control the market much more. We control the cost. We can manage the quality better as well. But that relies on us being able to viably acquire homes at the right price. That means that we can then cover the costs through local housing. There is there is this other issue, which is a kind of national policy issue, which is this widening gap between London rents and local housing allowance, the housing benefit, and because social rents, with a couple of exceptions, tend to go up by CPI plus 1 every year. Local housing allowance has been pretty flat for as long as any of us can remember. It's not linked to inflation, which means that gap just gets wider and wider and wider with no obvious prospect of eventually closing. And of course, government very reluctant to put up local housing allowance because of the huge impact that's on the benefit. So sorry, this is a much longer answer than you were expecting, but it's a really complex picture. And I think all of us in the London housing world are really struggling to see what kind of obvious answers there are out of it, even at the London level, let alone at the borough by borough level, if that makes sense. So we're doing our best, but at the moment it does feel a little bit like we're sticking fingers in a dam rather than coming up with kind of structural, strategic solutions to find a way out of it. Sorry, Kate, I should
No,
defer to you.
Dan. Everything that Dan has said is spot on. The only thing I would add is that another element is the changes in taxation. So that has, over the last few years, so that's led to even more landlords exiting the market. And what they identified yesterday is that landlords exiting the market, well, we don't really know what's happening with those properties. So it's an increasingly difficult situation. Last year we had an increase in the number of private renters in the seats at private renters offers that we made. We did also have a number of social lets because it's quite difficult to mobilise people, but we had a 14% increase in homelessness. So the demand far outstrips the supply. But as Dan said, it is definitely a London-wide issue. We are by no means the worst. This is not pushing anything permanently of the local authority. But it is an issue that we are collectively trying to find solutions towards and see whether we can do some regional projects for the issue and get residents to alternative very big challenge.
And we've invested a lot in the TA department to get your heads up. Not just in terms of standards, that was one area where we've made a lot of effort, but we're also looking at supply in terms of what incentives can we put together for landlords to bring these properties, what sort of bulk supply arrangements we might get where we've got people with multiple ownership that we can tap into to use. But we're all, we're out, as Dan says, the problem with all of London having the same properties, that we're all fighting over the same things. And what we've also seen is we've got other government departments, people like Serco, who are looking for accommodation for resettlement of people, ex-offenders, and they operate on a completely different budget to us, so they can pay a lot more than we can. So we're getting our bid on stock as well, but it's a real work.
For residents as well. Sorry, that's right, we can't answer, but we spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Well, I think credit, if you look at the headline TA number, it's actually quite flat, which is a real credit to the work that was done in terms of the pressure that we've been able to keep that headline number down by getting people into accommodation. The disappointment is that within our budget, we were anticipating having a saving this year based upon what we were doing last year in terms of our ability to get better at putting people into better and more affordable accommodation. But we're really, like King Canute at the moment, trying to push the waves back.
Councillor Rossi?
I think that pretty well was my question. It was kind of, given what's going on with the interest rates, the mortgages, landlords coming out of the market, rents going up, it's like, how worried are you that we are really going to get into problems with, you've got 100 people, households already in hotels, and it's like, there isn't, and I don't really expect you to answer, but can you see a way through this?
Yes, is the short answer. There's two ways through it. There's one which is a checkbook, and there will be an impact on us in terms of our overall cost. Our net cost difference between rental and receipt has gone up by about £1 million over this last year. So there is a real budgetary pressure to us. So there is a solution in as much that we, you know, our rental cost just has to go, is under pressure. And the other thing is looking at ways that we might get bulk supply. You know, we'll look at blocks and things that are out of borough that we might be able to secure, so we can use that in terms of the TA. The advantage of that is you're not then on short-term rental agreements with independent landlords who then want things back. So you have that security to people. I think the other thing is encouraging our homeless people to go into PRS and support them going into PRS, and let them make those decisions as well. And you know, and I can think of somebody who was very grateful that was able to go and live next to his brother in Ealing in TA. And what we've done within our housing allocation is to say, well, you're still on our housing list, you're still a resident of RBKC, and we'll give you accumulated points based upon your waiting time.
Yeah.
So at least they feel that at some point they're going to come back to us. But it empowers them to find the accommodation where they want to be, rather than us saying, oh, by the way, we've got something in Barking and Dagenham, we may need to go. And I think we can do more with that.
Okay, I'll leave this at that.
Mine's been asked as well.
Just a couple of points, just mainly on the challenges and risks section. So in relation to housing solutions, I know you mentioned the impact of the Ukraine and Afghanistan resettlement schemes. I'm just curious why other applicants seeking asylum from countries other than those two aren't mentioned. Is that because they fall under another category? Is it because they're all considered NRPF? Is that the answer?
Yeah, so yeah, okay, yeah, we should have actually added that on there. So the Ukraine and the Afghan asylum seekers, those ones have their status is pretty much determined already. So when they approach us for housing assistance, highly likely that they're eligible. The residents in the contingency hotels, they are waiting the outcome of the application with the Home Office. Some of them have been there for a sustained period of time. The Home Office have introduced a streamlined assessment process, which is designed to fast track some applications. So some of those residents, we may see them sooner than anticipated.
Assuming that
Yes, exactly. But the vast majority of those residents, those ones may take some time to actually come through. So in terms of this financial year, the Afghan and Ukraine, we're more likely to see more of those than we are in the ones who are in contingency hotels, other than those who have been placed on it's called a SAP, streamlined assessment process.
But it is the case, isn't it, that effectively the Afghans and Ukrainians who have come in under those schemes, there are people from actually Afghanistan who come in under it, but people who come in through those schemes effectively have their status and are eligible for our support the minute they enter the country. And that's kind of fundamentally different from the asylum seekers in the hotels, who until their case is resolved have no optional right to.
So I suppose it would only really be a risk to the Home Office of their efforts, and we started to see a real throughput in terms of people being to asylum. Just a couple more questions. Please.
I was going to say that another nation was Sudan. There was some communication today which was released about the changes in eligibility for those residents as well. What we've seen.
That's a good point. It's very live at the moment.
Yeah. So the other point I was just going to make is that none of us are particularly holding our breath, I don't think, but if the Home Office were to significantly accelerate the rate of resolving cases, then that would risk putting particular pressure on local authorities where there are a lot of contingency hotels, of which we are one. So kind of we need to stay alive to how that's looking, because I think if and when that were to happen, we and kind of Hillingdon and the other kind of handful of boroughs in London who are taking the majority of contingency hotels will probably see that crystallise in a disproportionately large way, because people will be stepping out of their hotels in the borough they've already got to know. You'd expect them to approach us.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And staying with the same section in terms of the risk increased homelessness, and I wonder, it'd be my view that rough sleeping specifically should be also mentioned in that section. I know the number is relatively low at the moment, of course, any number's too high, but I just think about the risks to people who are rough sleeping. Of course, they are higher all other things being equal to someone who's, say, homeless and couch surfing and that sort of thing. So just to flag that as perhaps a specific risk within that bucket. And then just the final point, just in relation to the section as a whole, I wonder if it would also be helpful, and perhaps it's not, feel free to give me your opinion, but having potential mitigation factors that may actually reduce the risks or reduce the challenges. I'm thinking of Ukraine, perhaps as an example, if the war were to end, or if many people, and because of that, people who are currently here think, well, I want to go back home now, that could be something within next year that could potentially happen and would significantly alter that as a risk factor. So I feel as if perhaps, as well as challenges and risks, it's also worth thinking about the opposite,
Yeah.
because that could also affect what we do.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And it probably is fair to say that kind of we have a tendency, as it were, to plan for the worst case scenario, which we have a responsibility to do for obvious reasons. That's not a reason to think about kind of how our horizon to look at the, we're always terrified of optimism bias, but that probably pushes us a bit too far in the opposite direction.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member of the public wish to speak on this paper? In that case, I just have one quick point I'd like to note, which is on page 33 is your priorities. The penultimate bullet point, looking at local housing management service. So as we know, there is dedicated housing management within Nottingdale, specifically on Lancaster West Estate and York Rocks. And clearly there's a lot of excellent work that's gone on there. However, that also means there's been a two-tier service, really. I know we've spoken about this before, and so I just want to say I'm really pleased to see this is listed on your priorities. Great that you're starting with Wales End Estate. I just want to flag up the, I'm going to say divisions that have been caused as a legacy of that aspect of global response. So in terms of Nottingdale, who have had their noses rubbed up against shiny W11 bands and what have you, I would like to see perhaps some consideration of putting something in place there. However that may be done. That was my only comment. So thank you everyone for the comments and questions on that. I think it's, I'd like to second Councillor Gardner's point that I think going forward it would be really great to have this paper a little bit further in advance. Certainly like the risks and challenges and the priorities, seeing those all condensed together in one piece is really, really helpful. So thank you for that, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
What? Now.
Sorry, son.
Oh, she's so different when you're waiting, son.
I had a lot of emails to catch up on. So it's a good time.
So agenda item 6B. Once again, this is another scene setting report. Inform us of service priorities for the upcoming year, and we're speaking with involvement in thank you very much for the report. And I will start with my vice chair.
Certainly, if the lead member wants to put more on to introduce what I've got to say.
I would just say a few words, say thank you for the opportunity for doing this report, because it's always quite helpful to pull everything together from our point of view as well. And as you'll see in the report, there's been quite a lot of changes to which Mara because of the cost cutting we had to do. So we've had to reduce some of our.
So we've gone down from 5 teams to 4 by reducing one of the heads of service. And we have gone through the reorganisation, but it hasn't been implemented because we still have to recruit to some of the roles that will enable us to pull the teams together and go live with the new structure. So the paper reflects that. We refer back to what the structure currently is, but this paper is basically articulating what the structure will be and the priorities and services. It isn't the case that we have cut our services, it's more that we have merged the services into fewer teams.
Efficiencies. And again, some of you'll see, so I'm sure many of these names are familiar to you, so in local life are very familiar. But also I'd just like to point out something on page 50, bookable spaces is something we're really trying to work with. Every time we go out in the community, we're often told and we see for ourselves that people struggle finding spaces for community events and struggle having meetings, and we see this. And yet we see lots of spaces that aren't used all the time because it could be an after-school group or it could be a mid-morning sewing workshop. And so we're really trying to encourage a lot more sharing on that aspect. And we thought we'd better start with our own council spaces first. So we're putting together a proper platform for that, which is practically live any minute now. So I think that will help some of the challenges we get asked about. And then on the consultation bit on page 51, we're really excited about our youth participation. We have a fantastically engaged youth council, and Hashim meets with them every Monday night, and we get a lot of feedback from them. And we just want to kind of make sure we're really harnessing that and working with them to the best of our abilities.
I just want to say in terms of youth participation, just leading on from what Sophia said, is that we very much want to amplify the young people's voice, not just in terms of youth services, but also in terms of other council activities. So we get young people involved, as we did in the development of the council plan, but also in issues around health, around planning, around green spaces, so that because they are the future, we want to engage them and also harness the resource that is the youth council so that they can engage with their as well on behalf of the council.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to particularly draw our attention to? We have all read the report.
I would just particularly like to say that in terms of the Grenfell projects team, the Grenfell community team, the team is no longer named Grenfell Community Team. It is now Neighbourhood and Community, and that includes other community partnerships officers, but the priority is still around Grenfell. But we expanded the team to include other functions and other activities around supporting the community. So now it's a borough-wide team. There's a dedicated resource that is for Grenfell.
How is that named?
It's Neighbourhoods and Communities.
No, I mean, how is the provision within that team?
Oh, it's still the Grenfell Community Programme. So the provision is still named the Grenfell Community Programme. It's still the community leadership programme. So all the activities.
Those are aspects of the Grenfell strategy. But in terms of the Grenfell community team, who are delivering those aspects, they're not called that anymore.
No, they are part of they are now part of the neighbourhoods and communities function. So the team is community partnerships, and they are within that.
Okay, thank you.
And something also which I would like to draw my attention is on page 37. We talk about our priorities. One of them is transforming how people can access advice across the borough, but we're also doing this within our council as well, and trying to work much more across different council services with our monitoring forms, and we're trying to kind of work with the Children's Family Services with our monitoring forms and our monitoring forms from the borough grants that we give out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, would you like to?
Well, I don't have any questions as such, but I've just observed that in the areas of focus scrutiny, it's 7.1 squadron overlap between your thoughts and where we were thinking, so we go for budget funds or for these jobs. And particularly with the Sector Support Fund, which is going through a major review this year, and I think that's something we're quite keen to look at and upgrading. So those are the kind of areas we're looking at. We decide that for the next item, and I'll really defer to whoever's next to ask a question.
Right, Teresa, you have your hand up.
Yeah, could you say what's happened to what it was called the Grenfell Assembly? I think it might now be called, I don't know what it's called, something else, the North Kensington, whatever it is now. Because the last one I went to, when it was a while ago now, people were expressing, they felt that their needs were not really being met by what was going on. So I just wondered what had happened with it. And also, can we be given sort of advance notice of when they are
Yes. Yes. So thank you for this question. We've now realised exactly what you said, that we were trying to, I think the Grenfell Assembly was trying to be kind of too many things and not focusing on specifically on Grenfell issues. We've listened to feedback, and we are still going to do a Grenfell Assembly. It's going to come under Callum's team now. He's so embedded in the whole area. And my last conversation with him was that one was coming soon, obviously because it was the anniversary last week. We were going to be doing anything on the anniversary. And my recollection, I think he's planning on one quite soon. But the idea behind it is to make sure we can actually get other stakeholders there, so we can actually get the NHS there, because there's a lot of concern about where their money has been spent. We've even asked DLUHC to come down and find out what's going on in the Royal Commission. And so there's many things that the council doesn't control, it doesn't have any input in. The residents rightly want to know about the air pollution, and that came up relatively recently as well. So that is happening. And then secondly, we are also going to have place-based community conversations all across the borough, because we still want to hear from other parts of North Kensington. We still want to hear from Central Kensington, we want to hear from Chelsea, we want to hear from Earls Court. So we're doing a series of those across the borough. And we have got an initial programme for those. I think we're going to start with Chelsea in September, from memory. So these are building on, we did the Chelsea Forum, and then when some of us were new councillors in 2018, we had the listening forums. So it's building on those.
That's wonderful.
Just a couple of minor questions. I'm really pleased to hear about the Bookless Spaces and sharing community spaces. How is that going to be, how are people going to find out about that?
Yes, good question. At the moment we're doing a very soft launch because it's IT based, it's on our computer system, so we want to make sure we get rid of all the glitches first. And then we will do a big kind of blast about it, and we would love so once we're confident of our system, having a demo this Thursday.
And my other question is, the keenness on RAs, Resident Association, and I see on page 52 there is a brief mention to further recognise, support and value our RAs. What else are we going to be doing?
Yes, so thank you very much for this. In fact, whilst I was waiting for the housing aspect to finish, I was checking out my emails, and all councillors will be receiving an email tomorrow or the next day about how we want to check all our resident associations databases up to date, and we'll be asking all councillors for their input and their help on that, because all councillors are best placed to know actually which resident associations are functioning and which no longer function. So that would be the first part of it. And the other part is, thank you very much for your motion earlier this year, when you brought up again the idea of the gold standard that we used to have, and as you know, stop resources. But there's something that we are still working on, kind of gold standard light, I think we're calling it. Guilt? No, not guilt, no, that's going to be someone. Gold standard light. So we are looking at that, Lloyd, and not sure what we're still, where we are exactly on.
So is it first steps that you will be reaching out with ward councillors' help, I hope, because I can't imagine this is going to be a big But we're going to re-engage with them again. We've got to recreate a database. So are you going to be reaching out to residents associations to see if they still exist, to see who are they probably constituted, to get the constitutions, their officers, all that sort of thing. And I mean, in my own ward, there's one resident association that actually wants to help the other resident associations in the same ward, so we can help support those that are failing or lagging, or they just haven't got people that are interested to it. And if we have a kind of set of a standard ways of helping them set this out, like a standard form that is really, really simple, tick box, a number of people, do you hold an AGM, do you do tick, 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 it's really easy to do, because I do feel for the officers, and as I said in the council chamber, I do think this is where councillors from each ward can help you guys to create a really good standard so we can be the best council and recognise our resident associations.
So the first step will be this week, getting feedback, and I've asked for a response by the 30th of July from all ward councillors to do exactly that, to hammer the database into shape, and then reach out to everyone and find out. I mean, many of our resident associations are constituted, do have AGMs, some charge fees, some don't. You know, I think we'll all know within our own wards that the majority of the ones that do, and then one or two are much more, one or two are just fallen by the wayside. So that'll be the first thing, and then we will reach out to them, and we'll find out if they do want to be part of the gold standard self-verification system.
And definitely we've got providing guidance on good practice and what we need to have in place to be a good and operational and inclusive residents association. So providing all that guidance, we are looking to see good practice elsewhere, to see whether there's any guidance that we can adapt for our BKC. And we will, as is mentioned in the paper around the community partnerships team, community partnerships officers are place-based, so they should be aware also of the local RAs in the areas for which they are responsible, and they should regularly reach out and have conversations with them.
So I mean, that's where we can offer practical support. So it's very simply a small RA that isn't properly constituted, that doesn't really have a regular, they just have an informal meeting. And there are some that you just don't even know they exist, they just kind of form themselves. And so that's good to hear. Thank you very much.
Can I just follow on? I also second Lloyd's motion. So I'm quite interested in resident association. I think one of the things that you're missing in what you're saying is actually to pull all the resident associations together in a meeting to kind of actually talk to them about best practice. And that's what can we learn from you, what can you learn, and what can resident associations share? Because I know, for example, I chair my resident association, it's very small, where we have a company, but we don't have any bank accounts. So actually it's posed a challenge with things like city living, or rental grids. So actually, you kind of look at it and you go, there's so much that if you put together, and I know another room is a very active resident and she reaches out, but she's not got a formal resident association. And you kind of go, if we actually get, for example, a couple of wards together in a room where all those resident associations and some rep can come and talk, I think there's a lot that we can pick up from resident associations and they can teach themselves, as well as the fact that actually we put names to faces.
We can definitely offer that. I mean,
I'd like to have it in the mayor's parlour, the mayor work.
Which is what we did before, yeah. And it's very good that they...
People who drink, make it a sort of a bit, not a party obviously, but of a meeting.
I think you probably have a meeting and you come and have a chat and a drink afterwards.
Well,
we can definitely, once we have the up-to-date database, we can email out to all RAs and see if anyone wants to come. So that has just been refreshed. I think it actually doesn't, doesn't it? It's in here and it's not a statutory. I'm looking at Chair Rose. But
I don't think it's what I see.
I don't think it goes to IC. That's not statutory. And it has just recently been refreshed. So we take the census, the borough census, the census, and we try to align our citizen panel with diversity in our borough, and both age, ethnicity. And we've got a pretty good cross-reference all across the borough, and that's about 2,000 people, and the majority of them, they do it online surveys. And then we've had one fantastic event where over 100 came to the town hall. We'll use you another one of those. So, and it's very useful on many of our consultations.
Does that get sorry, when you said it's been refreshed, how often does it get refreshed?
It's been refreshed very recently, so
Yes,
I,
we refresh every year.
Every year.
Yes, so there are some members of the panel that haven't responded to any surveys, so we kind of go through, and the current refresh was 25%, so 500 people came on board this year. It was done through door knocking. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment and a short question. Comment is just in relation to section 6.3 and 4, just about the youth council there engaging young people. I think that's really good. It's important young people have voice. It's a long-term investment in the health of the borough when these people grow up and understand how local government works and have a sense of civic responsibility. My question is just more in relation to the strategy and widening engagement with young people. I'd just ask whether you can widen engagement also within young people, because so often with these programs, at least in my opinion, it does tend to be often the same type of children who have parents, plural, who encourage them into these things, push them into these things. I would ask that a specific proactive focus is taken to encourage, say, young people in care with single parents, young people who are carers for an adult parent, not just people who look different, but people who are different. Make sure that they're included so that the voice of the young people is not just one section of young people, but actually it's a broad representation of young people as a whole.
that's a very good point. Thank you. We'll make sure we do that. We are, as it says, doing a youth strategy on our consultation, but also we're working very closely with the youth team. And I know one of the best things that I did when I was Deputy Mayor, I went to the Step Up Awards, which was fantastic for our children in care, which one of our officers in Family and Children's Services was very involved in, and it's a really wonderful event. So I'll make sure that we do definitely do that, but thank you for that. It's really useful. Thank you.
That very important point, and it is something that we're thinking about working with the youth council to reach out to other young people. But you're absolutely right, you get engaged young people involved. And there are young people, for example, Stable Way, the travel community there, young people that really don't engage in any activities, so making sure that we can hear their voices and in a way that they want to engage with us.
Thank you very much.
What about old people? It's not much about old people. Ageing population, a lot of people, can't remember, so 40% of people living on their own in the borough, plus an ageing population.
Okay, we can make that
yeah, well, we don't do much for old people in this borough, and I don't actually see why their voice is any less important than children.
No,
Could I make a point there? It's because older people tend to engage. So there's we do have limited resources, and older people tend to engage with our consultations, with our engagement activities, with our events. We tend to get older people in the room. We tend to hear their voice. So there is less resource towards that because they are quite an active age cohort compared to young people.
Makes sense.
That's
one
Chair,
of the
if I may invite you to come along to our Camden Senior Citizens Lunch Club, which is very active.
No, I don't need to. I don't need to. I do the forum for older people, but I would only 50% buy that. I think, yes, that might be partially true, but not.
Let's find some statistics. Because I think one of the issues actually on the citizen panel was that we were actually only hearing from quite a few voices. I mean, and you understand why, because, you know, when you're younger, you're focusing on your education, or your career, or your family, and then you have a bit more time to kind of give back to the community. So, but I mean, we can definitely find some statistics, definitely.
Thank you. Does any member of the public wish to speak?
Yeah, I'm the chairman of the Pond House Residents Association, and we haven't been asked to update our details since at least before lockdown. And we always reply to that email when it gets sent. We just haven't been asked. We're ready to respond.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe we know your details are up to date. I'd like to hoped that we would, but
Well,
that's great, thank you, we'll
yeah,
do each other.
I did have a bit of correspondence with the council because our address wouldn't fit in the size of the box on the website. And it was, so we had to take London out. So, you know, because it's obvious we're in London.
Yes. Thank you, we'll make sure, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that. And thank you also to the committee. I would just like to say a few words, really to condense what you guys all have said. In terms of the youth council, I was going to ask how diverse is that in every level of diversity, as Councillor Lane was saying, as well as social economic ethnicity, disability, the whole gamut. Because the youth council, I've seen them come to full council, they're very impressive. And I would like to know a bit more about the makeup of that.
We can definitely find out. When I've sat in on one of the youth councils, it's pretty much every Monday evening, 5 o'clock, no, commission on 5, I think about 5:30 or 6 after school. And it's, you have a lot from Chelsea Academy, a lot from KAA, a few from Holland Park. We can definitely find out more specifically.
Balance, water balance.
Yeah, very mixed gender. I mean, definitely, yeah. Definitely, I wasn't.
We'd like to see the stats, I think.
Yeah, we'd love to see the stats. And also to echo what Councillor Rossi has said, while it is of course excellent and I can fully understand the reason for the resourcing towards young people, we do also need to be considering the needs of older people also. However, we are getting informed about those, and also lone households. I think we need to make sure that by focusing on one thing, we're not neglecting anybody else. And I wanted to quickly raise a couple of other points. One, vis-a-vis CLLL, which is having its review. As chair, I'd like to be get informed about that, and I'm sure the committee would be interested to possibly have input into that as well. And on the question of advice services,
yes,
there is the issue of World's End.
I was there today, yes.
Great. And the associated services that we work with young fives and the rest of them.
Yep.
And I really want to see that the decision making in the council is not actually, while sounding very shiny and wonderful, is not actually creating on the ground detriment to the residents, as we saw from those who came to the council all the time. And finally, on consultation, as a possible, this will come also to the next agenda item, I think, but as a possible item for some type of scrutiny by this committee, to look at the consultation and engagement as a general item. But I would like to say what I said, read the previous paper 6A also, how useful this has been to have this sort of condensed summary, and it's very comprehensive. And I think we can probably also echo our comments, read the last one, that it would also be useful to have this a little bit sooner before for our work programme planning.
Sooner in the year, not just sooner before a committee meeting.
I think perhaps for Jackie.
That's for me, that's a point for me, yeah.
These scene setting.
Sorry, Jackie. It's all right.
Well, maybe the time to do it is to have them ready for the AGM,
Yeah.
and then as soon as we know who's on which committee, with
Yeah.
the papers issued to the committee, so we can cogitate on them as we think about our agenda. I'm sure that work across the board with all the committees, with the equivalent papers.
Well, thank you both very much for coming. And thank you for saying so late.
No.
As I said to you, I could try and balance it so that it's fair. It's not really the same person at the end. Thank you all very much.
Yes. There's a question, isn't there, about community on the work agenda?
Yes, there is.
About what status the driving long license what
The
page?
voluntary sector support fund.
Right.
Yeah,
So what stage it's at, as to whether,
what's the best point for us to be and have a scrutiny session on it and how, what,
thank you.
that I guess was something we were wrestling with and
You didn't know the
think
answer.
we didn't know the answer at the time. I think we're probably some way towards it from this paper, but when do you think we should scrutinise it? I think that's the question.
Pretty soon.
So at that point, we're scrutinising the criteria as opposed
Yeah.
to what we've done.
So we're still, the final decision has to happen in December, end of December, to allow the 3 months before March 2024. So in the run up to that, this is why we've been kind of trying to kind of work ahead of ourselves, because we know that we can't leave everything to the last minute. So bear in mind, summer's coming, and so autumn gets rolled up pretty quickly.
Yes, yes. So the fund is going to be open for applications this week. So it's going to be open for 6 weeks. And then there will be a cross-organizational panel of colleagues that will look at the applications, and there will be due diligence, and there will be recommendations in terms of who should be allocated funding.
So the criteria have already been set, so I think that's what we were actually saying, can we look at the criteria? But
So
it
the
sounds like
criteria
it's too late.
pretty similar to what it's always been. We haven't dramatically changed it, we just aligned it slightly more with the council plan.
Is it
The
amendable
fair
at this
aspect.
stage?
Um,
Well, let me just also ask. So let's say if we did this in August, and I know we're not going to get a meeting. At that stage, you've got your applications coming in, but we could scrutinise the assessment criteria and the process. Perhaps. But if we did it in February, we might be able to scrutinise what did you do, and what was the outcome, and did it work?
And the
two different
impact.
questions. So,
yeah,
and
depends what part of it you want to get
where
involved in.
all we do both. I mean, that's we probably don't have time to do both.
Yeah.
So
our next meeting is on the 19th.
yeah. So is the 19th of September?
I think that would be, I think it'd be a very good time to do it. Yeah. Because we still would not have made any decisions at all by then.
Jack is not in it. So
Yeah.
It's, yeah. And we've noted that away.
Okay, thank you very much. This brings us to agenda item 7, and the committee is required to develop a detailed draft work programme 2023 to 2024, which will be presented to the overview in scrutiny committee on the 5th of July. The topics that have already been agreed to be included in the work programme are key performance data for housing and social investment and community, to include additional data on registered providers, empty homes, turnaround time to voids, scrutiny of budget proposals, that's number 2, a report on damp and mould, that's 3. And I think that's it. Is there any more? Thank you very much.
I wasn't here at the beginning. Greg, could you repeat my point back in about the fact that we still haven't agreed regulation set?
On the minute, yes. But for
So-
the scrutiny, yes.
So that's
I'll
still
talk to
feeding
Moira
into
and
this.
I'll take that as an action. And talk to Moira and we'll build that in.
I did it on the minute.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, the items, topics already agreed to be included include key performance data, scrutiny of budget proposals, a report on damp and mould. We also have housing revenue account. Yes?
That would be part of the budget stuff, yeah, but you're right, that's separate, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, council is attending the workshop on the 6th of June. Put forward the following priorities and discuss other lines of work. Topics and themes are set out in paragraph 3.6 of the programme report, which is on page 56. we've all read it. Don't need to read those out, do I? And the select committee is invited to discuss the shortlist and agree up to 5 topics. Now, I'm presuming that this is in addition to the ones already agreed.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So, Becky, what can you tell us?
Well, scrutiny sets an annual work programme so that you can plan, get information, but also there has to be some flex in the programme, things coming up that are not anticipated at the beginning of the year. So obviously this list was developed and the decision is made this evening on what you want to do, but that's up to you at this meeting to make a decision. And then afterwards, Ella will work with you as your new scrutiny policy officer to develop the detail of it, including the reports to the committee, but activities you might want to do outside of committee, such as visits to places and services and any working groups that you decide to do.
Thank you. Can I invite any questions from the committee members first?
Yeah, sure. Well, as a comment, I mean, we've had a discussion, some of us together, some of us individually. The top 2 are relatively short ones, but I think, you know, as fire safety, I think we absolutely have to do it and be seen to do it at some point during the year. Because it's a relatively short topic with a paper on what are the latest issues, and I think somebody suggested doors because it's one of the projects. Grenfell rehousing, we've looked at this a number of times, so it has the second move going. That's the big one really, because there's very little left to do with the original moves, but you still need a report on. But it's probably relatively short. Community engagement, by contrast, has got several dimensions to it. We talked about housing, comms and engagement with tenants earlier on, but then we've also talked about we thought comms team and resident consultation, and they're revised at separate subjects. So that's potentially, that hasn't really got pinned down as to being exactly what it is, or perhaps more than one subject in there. VSSF and VSOs, we've just talked about that, and I think it probably is one topic there in that, under that heading. That sounds like September's a good time to do it. New homes, there's 2 things to do there. One, it's a huge item of expenditure, so we probably ought to get a reporting committee, but 2, it's our team outing to go and look at something. I think that's as a team visit. Yeah. And
are they ready yet, those houses?
well, there's some ready. I mean,
Councillor Cochrane House.
there's certainly at least one, if not 2 sites we can look at, and there's 1 or 2 that probably we have to keep away from because they're at critical stages of building.
Yeah.
Just going on to the, I mean, TA is certainly something we could talk about in here. Visits, the other visit thing we talked about were the individual visits. I think we need for the next meeting, but in fact probably offline, we need a list of what are the options for visits, so we can agree at the next meeting who's doing what. So we get an individual visit to go and do to look at, say, fire safety, maintenance, repairs, upgrades, and anything that strikes you really. But I think we ought to have decided that by the next meeting. And that was my just Jackie's face. Jackie's was the back. I'll wait for Jackie to get back. She has a critical role in the fun about phone X.
I do apologise, I forgot to switch my phone off.
Right. And then we had 2 other activities. One was a resident conference on repairs and maintenance. We do that. Do that as a one-off meeting of the committee where we have the panel of the key council officers, and we want to invite in residents to, rather as we do that
Yeah.
behaviour, the same kind of format, and let the residents speak, give feedback, and then panel can listen, host and respond as required. And then we were thinking about the working group, which MT was particularly keen on hospice ASB, and
Rather than ASB, I'd say it's the management of the hostels. I mean, we are looking at ASB, but I think the idea would be to see how they're run, I think, and whether, I mean, I don't want to prejudge, but if they're not run particularly well, then you're going to get more antisocial behaviour. That's the theory. So.
I mean, I like that as an idea. I think that would be really valuable. But if we're going to do it, we need to agree it today, so that you can get it kicked off before the summer holidays. And
well, yes, but we have to have a member of opposition on it.
Well, we do. We only have one member of the opposition, who's
really?
not the chair, and she's kind of
Why can't the chair do it?
Well, I've just come back on a couple of things. I think it's good if other councillors chair working groups, because it gives everybody a chance to do something. So any backbench councillor can be a member of a working group. So yeah, it's good if they're members of the committee, but you may find that other councillors have an interest in this. So I would suggest it should be chaired by somebody from this committee, but it doesn't have to exclusively be
No, I understand
members from
that.
here.
So, I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, I would be happy. It does link in with the kind of old school call to action, but this is a specific thing about where there are a lot of hostels in old school and in mine as well, where they're probably not being run very well.
So we need to, as you say, separate out, because the Earls Court councillor call for action will be included, the updates still in the overview and scrutiny.
I know that.
Yeah.
There's an overlap.
This is a separate.
Yeah.
There's a separate working group specifically on hostels.
Yes.
Which borough-wide.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
and
we
it
need
is
to
borough-wide,
consider
yes.
who amongst us would be willing and happy to chair such a working group.
I would be happy to chair it.
You
So
would?
who would happy to be on it? Yeah.
How many would it be an optimal?
I'd recommend between 3 and 5 councillors, but as you've spoken about this meeting, if councillors want to think about it afterwards, you don't have to say here and now. We can do a bit of admin to remind everyone you've discussed and who wants to be on it.
So 2 with 3 councillors and 1 with 4.
Who have you decided?
Between 3 and 5 minutes.
I would ideally 3, minimum, I would
So
say.
that's TBC.
Because it is a lot of work.
And one of
Probably
those
need
is,
to-
one of those is,
Should be cross-party.
Well, yes, in balance, we need 2 from our side and one Labour basically. But
Well,
you
I
can
mean, I
determine.
think on this particular subject, I'd just like to put out the possibility that there are one party, and Linda Wade is a member of the Earls Court, is she not?
is that the fact?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should be discussing her like this, but the thing that
I
I
was just
think
going to put her
is
forward as a possible that we could ask.
Yeah.
This is TBC.
We can email all councillors if that's the way you want to go and see who wants to come forward.
and she does have a lot of knowledge of the
This is what I'm thinking.
the local ones, not of borough-wide, but
No.
So,
Well, that's why
I
we're
suppose
supposed
there's a
to
question
find.
actually whether she would be good as actually somebody you interview, if you wish to do it borough-wide because she's too specific. But I genuinely don't know. But I'll
I think what we need to do is, I mean, I might not have the right idea about exactly the geographical location of these hostels, because I just know the ones, that are near me. I know there are some in Courtfield. I don't know.
I think as part of the
Happy to-
work, we'd have a scene setting report, and part of that scene setting report would include the geographical information about where that's.
Yeah.
And what are they? Because
Yeah.
hostels vary
And there's lots of different types of hostel. And I think you're absolutely right, it should be borough-wide, because it's the weight restricting it
I agree.
to one area.
And so it's subject to any of the newer councillors, we should do it, I'd be happy to volunteer.
Thank you.
It's a good balance.
Yeah.
That's great.
Balance across covering the time the sort of geographic range of
Yeah.
our party.
Good.
Because we need yours.
Excellent.
Have we got a Labour one? Yes.
Oh yeah, well we've sort of De Harbo was sort of in her absence sort of gets stitched, but maybe somebody else would be would prefer to do it. Because certainly when I did one in housing 3 years ago, I had somebody from off the committee from the opposition.
And I've just done 5 working group and I'm environmental, so.
Yeah, you were on the front one.
We've got an environmental secretary.
But that report's it's concluded that working group, so.
That's potentially through.
Yeah.
PVC, excellent. So you would.
So we canvass your party group on your private WhatsApp. So who replies, see if somebody, just in case you didn't want to, because you didn't hear, so.
No, we can't sort of go covering with that telling. So, but I put her down with a question mark. There's that. So we have the resident conference on repairs and maintenance, working group bookstores. We're going to get a list of visits in due course. So we have, just to recap you, Greg, fire safety, Grenfell rehousing, community engagement and consultation, BSSF and BSOs. New homes is going to be team visit.
But plus a paper as well, because it's budgetary aspect to that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is actually, I mean, there's two small ones, rather in terms of time taken, two small ones at the top. The community engagement's got more than my dimension, it's quite big. The BSSO is sort of average size, new homes is an average size in terms of how much time it takes the committee to do it. Everything's written under community engagement is quite nebulous, and how do you formulate it into a paper? And obviously, it's not our job to write the paper.
No, but I had a conversation today with Councillor Wheel that we will work with scrutiny councillors to get reports that are what they want. So it's if officers want to tell you things, they should tell you things, but also you want information, so we'll shape that up into something.
And were we thinking earlier that the community engagement might be a one-day event? Was that proposal mooted?
I noted that, I had forgotten about the repairs.
Right.
So it's a question of if you can do two. Really.
Can we do two?
I mean, you don't have to decide tonight how you're going to do it.
Okay,
What
so
we could do is, Bella and I will do some research and come back to you. Maybe we could come back to you in September and then you can decide, based on what we find out, the best way to do it might be.
Great.
Yes, for that, because I guess we hold that in sort of either later or towards
Yeah.
spring.
Yeah.
But the working group MT need to get cracking quite early, because to get a report by the time we need to do it, it needs an early start, so that's
When do we want the report by?
We'd like, ideally, I would suggest all working groups should finish within the council year, so by the end of March.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
good if they go
And
over into the next one.
you want to take it to full council and discuss it as well, don't you?
Yeah, but if you have to talk about your capacity, what you want to do, the scope of it, then your
Yeah.
capacity to do it within the time. So
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to go to full council within the council year. If you finish it by March, it could go to full council after that. We've done that before. Greg's done that
Well,
before.
I think that's what done. I know you'll have done loads of these in the past,
Yeah.
MT. The three I've done, I The only way I've made it work is having these kicking off meeting in July.
Yeah, that's
So we-
fine.
And that sort of means getting something in the diary pretty quickly.
And you don't want work hanging over to the next one,
Because you don't.
because the committee's different altogether, you just,
No, so
have
it's
to
good,
just
yeah.
get something done.
It's good to get something done within the year, so
Yeah.
you know what you've achieved as a committee.
Okay, that's fine.
So under VSSF and VSOs, I would like to make sure that also includes other support. And that will come under VSOs, I guess.
Yeah,
Just
so yeah, make sure it includes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone else like to speak on this paper? Any thoughts, suggestions, anything we've missed on?
It's just a question of getting dates from people's diaries for conferences and other things.
Yeah.
As early as possible.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah.
So in terms of topics, are we all happy and agreed so far?
Yes.
Yes. That's easy, yeah. Lovely. Okay, and we do have then some capacity for leeway should other things come up.
If there's a KD you want to look at or something unexpected happens, then you can always do that, you should do that.
First, are we automatically emailed KDs that are relevant to us, or is it every so often something pops up in my inbox, but I'm not clear why? Or,
Yeah, I had the same
or
thing, it's
whether-
slightly erratic it seems. Sometimes you kind of go through a phase of getting a lot and then you don't see any for a long time, and sometimes they do include you and sometimes they don't.
So the overview and scrutiny committee looks at the forward plan at each meeting, and then that committee allocates them out to the select committees. That's Claire's role as the chair on that committee to look at the KDs that you might be interested in, and she may have dialogue with you before she goes about what's on that forward plan. But also there are emails sent out to councillors on a daily and a weekly basis if you are signed up for them, which notify you when a KD is put on the forward plan. So you might pick something up there. I think councillors have to sign up for them, the alerts. So you might see something there that you think, oh, that's good for the committee, so you can speak to Claire. But I was actually wondering whether it was worth offering to do some kind of briefing session on KDs for councillors. Because a couple of people have mentioned this to me, or I can just send some information. But there are emails to be receiving.
Beneficial for new councillors to have.
Yeah, the new councillors, I think.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith, you have your hand up.
Yes, can I suggest about the residents' conference?
Yes.
The thing is just on repairs. We get very few people, so sorry about this. We get very few people turning up just for repairs, but if you made it about everything, you get many more people turning up. And the council used to engage with residents' associations previous to the recession via the Mayor's Garden Party, and that used to support local businesses by having them as suppliers for that. Now, that may be a bit controversial bringing that up in these times, but if it's going to support local businesses, then I'll put it forward that that is a good idea to go down that route. I also want to bring up the action tracker.
Can I come back to you on the first suggestion, because I think once you've got a group of residents together, even if you've got a theme for the conference, they will raise what they want to raise, and therefore it's kind of superfluous but if you want to make it focused, it is a good idea, I think, to put a focus on a meeting. You can make it slightly wider, like repairs, maintenance and upgrade, or something like that. So, but that is an area that we do have to scrutinise because the council spends. Because the council spends such a lot of money on that, it's an area that this committee really does need to scrutinise. And if we do it in a format where we're in the room with lots of residents, and if you might want to talk about something else, that's fine. But people are invited to talk about that, most people probably will. And we're also scrutinising this in this area of budget expenditure as well, whereas if you do something unfocused, the panel's less prepared. You can't, and you sort of prepare them for it by saying this is what we're going to talk about, largely about prepared. But they are pretty, the senior officers probably can win it on some of the other subjects because they do deal with them every day.
Right, okay. And about the action tracker, I'll bring that up.
This is at the very back, page 71.
That's right, yeah. First thing, there's 2 items missing from it.
Right.
And that's from back on page 7.
What are they?
From the minutes of the previous meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Point 5 on page 7 is whether Binman's LLP will be producing a report which could be shared with the tenants and requested for the instruction letter to Binman's LLP to be shared. Action Director of Housing Management. And point 6, requested for the details of those on the tenancy consultative committee resident plan to be shared with interested tenants.
So what you're saying is those 2 items are not on this tracker?
They're not on the tracker.
Yes, please do. Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. 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 So thank you for that. So I think if I can explain, this action tracker is the actions of the committee, whereas this is something which is requested by residents, and you're quite right to ask that it be followed up. And I have noted this, and we'll be getting that for you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Next point is about the second item down on the tracker, requesting that the full details of the wording of the conditions to be shared with the committee and tenants.
Yes.
And, well, I haven't actually received anything about that.
You have.
But also about the handbook as well, because Binman's were having a lot of trouble getting hold of the tenant's handbook from the council, the update of version.
Right. Well, that's helpful feedback. Thank you very much.
And the second to last point on page 72,
Yes.
managing empty homes. I did ask at the last meeting the total number of empty homes in the borough. And that's been circulated, but all I needed to know was the number. All we need to know is the number of empty homes in the borough.
I think we've probably got the answer of council homes, because that's what we know. I mean, we've no idea how many other homes.
Well, apparently something's been circulated, but I've not received anything.
I think somebody else might ask about this, and I can't remember the answer, unfortunately, but I think there is some information related possibly to the council tax register. I'm not sure. Someone else has to.
I could be an answer, but that would be it.
If I can find it.
Yeah.
You don't go right on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know my building and the needs that are occupied. I've got no idea. I come back at night and all the lights.
Do you
But there are
think,
people doing that. It's very strange.
Luke, maybe could you sort of take this up, because I don't think we're going to find it now. Could you?
Absolutely. We have some
Thank you.
information that was circulated to the committee.
Yes.
We just want to confirm with officers that they're happy for that to go into the public domain. So I can confirm that with officers, and then we can, if it is shareable, we'll share that in a published document for you.
If it's not shareable, will you tell me?
That's not my responsibility, I'm afraid.
I think we have to, because actually it can't not be shareable, I think, because information like that, I mean,
Something is
not going to be, it's not going to be personal data.
No.
So I think I can't imagine it wouldn't be. I can't imagine it wouldn't be shareable. but we will double check. Yes, yeah, you need to check.
Yeah.
Well, if it can be shareable
And with
at
every-
ward level, that would be great.
It might be shareable at ward level, it wouldn't be shareable at postcode level, because you
Oh,
don't
yeah,
identify
I know, I know.
individual
No, it would be
properties.
as far as level.
Yeah,
please.
borough level.
I don't think what we saw was right.
No, no, because we wouldn't want you to be able to GDPR to identify properties.
Well, there's certain areas, right.
So, if I just quickly, finally recap what we have, so we have, as well as the agreed topics listed already, we have fire safety, Grenfell rehousing, community engagement consultation, BSSF, BSOs, new homes, plus people for budgetary aspects, temporary accommodation, and we have two reserved topics, which is the local lettings plan and housing strategy. We have resident conference for repairs and maintenance, which should be Chairperson. And we also have a working group on hostels management to be chaired very kindly by Councillor Rossi, joined by Councillor Gardner, and and other TPC hopefully will be to harbour